Hello, John.
Good evening, Danna. Lovely to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too. It's good to finally get back together and do this. I wanted to start out by telling our audiences who may not have seen us before a little history. And with that, I wanted to tell everyone that you, John Smallman, if you don't know John Smallman, he's the author of Our Divine Destiny, and he also is a blogger. He has two blogs. If you just Google him, John Smallman, you'll find both of his blogs, and he has thousands of followers. And I'm Danna Beal, and I'm the author of The Extraordinary Workplace, Replacing Fear with Trust and Compassion. And I speak to business audiences, but John and I discovered we have a lot in common. We have a similar theme. And so um, a year ago, wasn't it about a year ago, John? Do you remember when you came to Seattle? Like November?
Yes, it was I came in December and then again in January
That's right.
so December 2016 and January 2017. Yeah.
Yes, and we had met
And since
online.
then we've done a couple of chats like this.
Yes, and we've had lots of people tune in to hear it, and we had such a good time, and we had some great people out here in the Seattle area and beyond that came and saw us actually live. But we decided then we would do some videos, and we don't really plan what we're going to talk about except that we pick a topic, and both of us really believe in the power of love, and I call it universal love. And John, do you want to say a little bit about love and how you describe that in your blogs and talks?
Sure. My perception is that love is all that exists. Everything is enclosed within the divine field of love. It's a variety of frequencies that all harmonize together, bringing us compassion, understanding, forgiveness, acceptance, healing, everything. And everything that God has created exists within this field of love. That's where we all are, and love is our nature.
Yes, that's a beautiful description. I have a little video that I made from the inspiration that I received regarding love, and it's very similar. And I was guided to understand that love is the power that sustains all life, and that is the reason we
Exactly.
exist. Yes, and it's the reason we exist, and it comforts us. It moves mountains. It helps us create beautiful fruition of all the things that we do if we start with the foundation of love. And unfortunately, especially in the workplace, but I have to say, even in the world, when we look around everywhere, there's a lot of fear that's blocking the love. And and so I thought that would be a good topic today to talk about liberation from fear, because that's the only way we can really connect to what you described as that field of energy and frequency that we're
Right,
connected.
yeah. Fear is a natural thing from our early evolution when we needed to be made aware that there was something threatening. But today we seem to live in fear because we feel threatened by our environment. And so we block ourselves off from love. If we could go through the fear, if we could realize that for the most part, there is nothing to fear. I mean, if you're driving down the freeway and someone cuts you out, whew, you need to do something. But apart from that, we shouldn't be in fear. It is a big distraction and it raises anxiety and it lowers our vibration. So if
Yes,
we can walk through it and realize, hey, in this moment, in this now moment, there is nothing I need fear, and open our hearts, love fills us, and we feel so much more alive and able and conscious.
absolutely. And what I've noticed is that in my audiences and with the people I coach, that right now, I think more than ever before, a lot of people are dealing with issues that cause us to react in fear. And we worry so much. We're so often in our mind thinking about what could happen, or how are we going to deal with something or the other. And more recently, I just gave a talk to an audience of 150 people here out here in Bellevue, and I started by asking them, how many of you in the audience have had a difficult or major disruption or struggle in your life just in the past year? And honestly, John, without any hesitation, nearly every hand in the room went up. And I just told the audience to look around and see that we are all experiencing struggle, and a lot of it never even happens. It's 99% of the things we worry are going to happen really don't. So how are we going to
Exactly, yeah.
Yes. How are we going to discover how to let go of some of that fear and realize that it's just our mind that's trying to protect us, and we get into that fear mode? And so what do you think helps you when you're starting to feel fear rise up? Because we all have fear.
We all do. I mean, I do a blog regularly and I post, and sometimes I look at it and I think, oh, I've said all this before, or Jesus or Saul has said all this before. Who wants to hear that? You know, nobody wants this. Nobody. And I realize that is just my ego putting me down, and I let go of the fear and I post it, and then I find lots of people really enjoyed it. So I get positive feedback that there is no need to be in fear. But nevertheless, growing up as a child, you get punished for all sorts of things. You're shamed, all sorts of stuff. And so fear tends to be very ingrained. It's like one of the easiest buttons to push in someone. And one needs to realize this and then become aware that, hey, really, I don't have to be in fear. And it's something one has to keep reminding oneself. You have to be aware of it, otherwise it takes over. And then suddenly you're, oh my goodness, I was sitting there fearfully worrying about whatever it is. Hey, I
Right.
don't need to do that.
Yes.
Because
And
normally when the thing that you fear dealing with actually arises and you have to deal with it, unless you're in extreme fear, you find you can resolve it easily. But you may be fearful of the person with whom you're trying to resolve the issue, and that, of course, does create a barrier.
right. And that's what we see a lot in the workplace, but actually we're seeing it everywhere in the world. I tell my audiences about the story about my dad. My dad was a POW in World War II. He flew a
Right,
B-7, no, a B-15, B-17, and he was a bomber pilot, and he was shot
right,
down and put in a prisoner of war camp. And the amazing thing is, at that time, my dad's heritage is German, but he was captured and imprisoned in a POW camp by the German Nazi Party, and he was there for 9 months. But unfortunately, he was released and he survived, but it was the Russians that came to liberate us, the Russians who were our allies at that time. And so what I began
right.
yes, I began to understand, and you're from England, and so you have a different cultural background than an American. We all bring our backgrounds, but what I realized is fear and making someone else the enemy is really just describing or creating some kind of drama or story about who, or it could be a person or a whole country, that is a threat to us or makes us feel fearful. So we're watching that everywhere all over the world right now. Blame and victimhood, and blame and victimhood, and it's just escalating. Like you said, when we're in fear, we just suddenly are trying to do everything we can to fix things, and we're no longer connecting at that point with our deep divine self. Would you agree with that?
And it seems normal to be in fear. It seems normal because we belong to a political party. We're maybe a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or something in one other country. And so there's always an enemy, the other political party. So you're always worried about what the other side are going to do. And so one is always on the defensive. And of course, as you say, it happens in the workplace too, with your boss or with the people that you're supposed to be supervising. There's always
Yeah.
that threat, that sense of us and them, instead of
Right.
the realization that we are all one.
Right.
This barrier is something I am constructing in my mind to
Yes.
separate us, and it's unreal.
Yeah, exactly. It's not real. It's based on our own beliefs, our own ideas of what the way things should be, and most of all, like you said, feeling defensive, like we need to protect not really ourself. It's our image of ourself that we're trying to protect. And so,
Right.
yes, so that's why I believe that becoming liberated from fear means actually taking the focus away from what's happening out there, but focusing and having the courage to look within. And I wanted to read a quote that I found the other day that just encapsulates what I am trying to teach as well, and I know you are. It's Jim Morrison, who was a singer with the Doors, and he wrote, "Expose yourself to your deepest fear. After that, fear has no power, and the fear of freedom shrinks and vanishes. You are free." So,
Yeah.
yeah. So what we're learning, I think, as a society is self-reflection. To have the courage to look at our own fear instead of projecting it or blaming it on someone else. And when you blame, obviously, what happens? If I blame you, John, and say you did something wrong, what does that make you feel like you have to do?
Apologize.
Well, that's what the authentic self would do. I forgot. You understand this, but the automatic most frequent response is to attack back. But
Right, to defend. Yeah.
yes, to defend. And so what I found is that it's really a dance that takes both sides, either both individuals, or it can be both political parties, or it can be both countries that are involved in this battle. It can be worldwide or individuals. I call it the individual or the collective ego. And we get into this,
Right.
yes, and one depends on the other. So you can't be a
Oh, very
victim.
much so.
Yes, you can't be a victim if somebody isn't perpetrating you, but you can't be the perpetrator without having a victim. So the real question is, and I want you to comment on this, the question we could ask ourselves is, when are we the perpetrator and when are we the perpetrated upon? And how would you describe that? We're both. We're not the victim and the perpetrator at the same, alternately, we're both. Would you agree with that?
That's right. We choose which to be in a certain situation. We may be dealing with our children and they're misbehaving, and therefore we become the perpetrator and we make them the victims. You naughty little brat, why did you do that? Or we're attending to our boss who has picked up some error we've made, excuse me, and then we're all, I'm terribly sorry, I'll try not to do it again. And we sort of flip-flop between those two roles,
Right.
which really is necessary. What we need to realize is within myself, I have everything I need to deal with any situation that arises. There is no need to be in fear, and there is no need to defend myself or attack someone else.
Right.
All I need do if someone attacks me is stand and listen and let them talk it out. And when they've spoken to me, then I can repeat back what I've heard and see if that is what they meant to say. And then we can negotiate from there. But so often what happens is somebody attacks me and I go, pow, straight back defending myself. And
Right.
it just causes it to keep continuing. It's like a continuous loop. You can't
Yes.
get out of it.
It's a
And this
reaction,
happens in
counter.
families, I think.
Right. Right. A reaction, counter reaction, another reaction, counter
Yeah.
reaction. And we also now know, I've been working a lot in the healthcare industry and working with some spine surgeons and presentations and neurosurgeons. And what they now know scientifically is that we actually have neural patterns in our brain that get into a circuitry that go round and round and round.
Right.
And they have found that with meditation and mindfulness, it's called neuroplasty, you can actually change the pathways in your brain. So what you and I are talking about, pausing and listening and taking down our walls of defense, actually has a physical component, a clinical component that now proves that what the ancient mystics have been teaching us for a couple thousand years actually are founded in and can be discovered in science. So to kind of summarize what you and I are talking about, when we feel fear, the first thing we should do, instead of letting our ego just jump in there and pow, like you said, is pause and take a deep breath. And when,
Exactly.
yes, and when we breathe, that's when I think we find that deep interconnection that's within each of us. When I'm coaching and when you and I talk and you and we're very vulnerable with each other and share the times we're afraid. I think what we're helping each other do all the time is be connected and empowered in our own way rather than expecting someone else to rescue us or someone else to be the blame or the
Exactly.
cause. So give me your thoughts on that, John.
Well, I agree totally with that. We can't blame anyone else for how we feel. The way I feel is the way I choose to feel. It may not seem that I have a choice because I'm in fear and I'm hiding from something, but in fact, I can choose how I feel in this moment.
Yes,
And when fear arises, if one can say, "Oh, I'm feeling fear. What is it I'm actually afraid of?" And if
yes,
you can identify that while you take that breath, you suddenly realize, afraid of that? That's nothing to be afraid of
right,
at all. I can cope with that. The fear is an underlying thing that doesn't have anything behind it most of the time.
right,
It's just an inbuilt, what am I going to do?
yes,
And if you can just stand, pause, and say, well, about what? And you realize, no, there's no need to be afraid.
right.
But it
Well,
does take practice. And of course,
yes,
as people have discovered, meditation is a great tool if you practice regularly to get into that quiet space where
mhm,
you don't feel anxiety and fear and you can relax and accept yourself. And once you
right,
can do that, then you can take it into the workplace.
yes.
And therefore, you are a calming and stabilizing influence instead of a conflicting and stirring up kind.
That's a perfect example of how that inner peace can then be uh, emanated in the workplace. I describe to my
Right.
different groups that I talk to that the workplace, you can imagine it's kind of like a lake. And are you adding toxic water to the lake by negative feelings or projections or blame or even gossip, which is so common in the workplace? And it isn't
Right.
just women that gossip, men do too. And
Everybody does, yeah.
yes. Or are we individually ask ourselves, am I going to the workplace and actually adding pristine, loving energy to the culture? Because the culture isn't just one person, and culture actually is a representation of everyone's feelings and thoughts and beliefs and the
That's
way
right.
yes, the way they do things. So there's no magic wand to change the culture. It's up to each one of us. And if you're in a leadership position, you have even more power because you influence more people. So really the path to liberation is not what you do out there. It's first who you're being. Love, operating from
Yep,
love. Yes, the foundation love. I actually have a name for that. I call it the Be Love model for leadership
yep.
because that kind of
And the
power,
other thing is, of course, we all have mixed cultures. We have our upbringing culture, the organizational culture where we work. Maybe there's a religious culture, then a political culture, then our ethnic, and they all get mixed up. And it
exactly.
can be very, very confusing.
Absolutely, and we have so much judgment, even if we think we don't, or we do because we have views that we learned since we were children, and so sometimes we're making,
Yep,
sometimes most of the time we're making up stories, not really communicating fully, and we're imagining what other people are saying or thinking or doing, and the real key is like you were talking about, being able to listen and communicate and get feedback, and really find that what we have in common, or what I call bonding with people
right.
on different levels, and you'll discover it's a lot harder to make an enemy with somebody or be fearful or cause fear in someone else if you see them as a human being with similar qualities to yourself, and it's just the most beautiful thing when people can see the humanity in one another instead of operating from fear. So that's what I teach
Definitely.
them.
One of the things is how approachable are people. Those
Yes,
who are in fear tend not to be approachable. They put up a barrier, and
yes,
those who come near feel it, and so they won't engage. And so there's this sort of conflict already there before anything happens. Whereas other places, you meet people who are totally at ease and approachable, and you can talk to them about anything, and all the barriers fall away.
yes. Absolutely. There is a field of energy that we can feel. And I liken it to um, our heart is a valve and it emanates, I call it love shine. And when our heart is open, people
Perfect. I
can,
like that.
yeah,
Love shine.
love shine. Well, sunshine comes from the sun, love shine comes from
Yep.
the heart. And there are studies, heart math,
Absolutely.
heart math shows that
Yep.
we do have energy emanating from our heart, and that our heart actually gives messages to our brain, not just our brain giving messages to our heart.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
if we have an open heart, then we are approachable, like you suggested. And if we're afraid of people hurting us, we put a wall around our heart. We pull up the drawbridge, so to speak. But then,
Yeah.
yeah, then we're disconnecting from people. So being
Well, you
authentic,
get a lot of people meeting to have a meeting, and they're all waiting for somebody else to open up, and nothing happens. And then somebody makes a strong statement that threatens people instead of just, hey, what are we here for?
yes, and finding the common goals and working together as a team really is um, first looking within yourself to be authentic, to be transparent, to relate to others for all their similarities, because the bottom line is everybody wants to be loved.
Right.
Yes, everybody wants to be needed, and it's in all of us. It's human. And so if we're creating fear in other people by blaming them or objectifying people or seeing them only as part of a machine to get things done, we're not empowering them to work very well in the workplace. In fact, that just explains why the Gallup poll shows approximately 70% of people in the workplace are disengaged. So that means they're not happy and they're not really contributing nearly from their full potential. So imagine if people started being more loving and creating trust in the workplace, how much could go up, the level of camaraderie, the level of teamwork, and ultimately profitability when people work together better. So that's my
And
message.
part of the problem,
Pardon?
yeah, part of the problem, I think, is judgment. We're always judging others. And so, although it'd be nice to be loving, you look at somebody and think, yeah, well, I wouldn't want to be loved by him or her. And so we immediately put up a barrier there, which is
Right,
crazy.
right.
We judge a person instead of saying, this is who they are. That's
Right.
fine. And we need to do that. And if we can do that, others will do the same for us. And then everything flows beautifully. But as long as we're in judgment mode, we're looking to score off someone or avoid somebody who might score off us.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of a world of one-upmanship, and that those are just superficial qualities. The true essence of who we are, the spirit in each one of us, is actually completely equal. So recognizing judgment in ourselves is really key to giving up fear and having the courage to look at our own weaknesses and inner fears, and then we can be contributing, being the beautiful, pristine energy in our culture, whether it's family or the world. Well, John, just to wrap up and kind of summarize, I know that your book is available as an audio book, and you do a lot of blogs that have the audio. And I've had people in our audiences say they actually fall asleep listening to your blogs at night because they're so comforting. What would you just kind of summarize your overall message that you are providing people, if you could, in a couple sentences about how people can have a better
Well,
world?
basically, it's love. There is only love. Both Jesus and that there is only love. Anything else is unreal. And we
Yes,
have great difficulty in understanding that. We think to be loving is dangerous, vulnerable, and we will be attacked and crushed. And in fact, the reverse is true.
yes,
And we need to not go into situations filled with fear. Before we go to a situation that causes us anxiety, we
right.
need to relax for 5 or 10 minutes and just get to a sense of peace so that we can go in peace, ready to listen instead of on the defensive expecting attack. And it makes a big, big difference. And I think it is happening all across the world. So many people are now becoming aware that love works, conflict doesn't, and we've solved nothing. We just produce further conflict.
Right.
When we leave conflict alone and engage lovingly and cooperatively, things get done. Definitely.
Yes.
That's all I have to say on that, really. Love,
It's,
love,
it,
love.
yes, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful message, John. You're out there in New Hampshire, and I can tell that occasionally, I hope our audiences can put up with a few little distortions in the video. And I'm out here in Seattle where it's been raining all day. Are you still in the snowy weather?
No, it's very cold here. The snow is pretty. We had rain about a week ago, and although we had a lot of snow, most of it has been washed away. And so now we have very dry, very cold with icy patches where snow has remained.
Yeah.
Actually, I was out on my deck today to shovel off the little snow there was, and it had all turned to ice. And shoveling it, it was like breaking glass. It was a lovely sound. I love the sound of breaking glass. And there I was shoveling away, and it was all breaking and shattering. And very amusing for me.
Just you were in alignment and out there in nature, and that always is one of the ways to get in connection with our divine self. Well, I would
Exactly.
summarize my message too, is that it's, complementary to yours. It's really the same message. But most of all, I would like to remind people that when we're worrying needlessly about what's going to happen next, it's because we're not trusting in our divine. We're imagining all kinds of anxieties and possibilities that are probably never going to happen. But when we connect with the divine and we're in the present moment, something arises within us that will help us deal with each issue as it comes up. So we're wasting way too much time worrying because that takes away from our present wonderful experience of just being here, being alive, being with the other people in our families and our workplace. And if we can heal the relationships closest to us right now, including starting with ourselves, we are going to be a gift to the world. So my book is the
Indeed,
extraordinary. Oh,
yes.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, indeed, yes. If we could go into a meeting, whether it's one-on-one or a big discussion meeting, if we go in with love in our hearts, others feel it, and it disarms the tension, and
Yes.
people relax.
Yes, and it's actually a true vibration that we can feel. So, again, my book is The Extraordinary Workplace, Replacing Fear with Trust and Compassion. And I
It's
also
a
have
great book.
thank,
I've
thank
read it a couple of times. It's wonderful.
Thank you. And all your work is beautiful too. And my website is just my name, Danna, DANNABEAL.com. And John Smallman has all his material available if you just Google him. So we hope that you've enjoyed today, and we thank all of you for listening. And please feel free to share this with anybody that you know that might be interested in this topic. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the winter, and spring is just around the corner.